overlay.
How do I know that?
Up in the upper left-hand corner, see what
The name thing?
Oh, so instead of red, where it used to say red,
Yeah.
it's got 5.
Well, welcome back, everybody. It's 11:50. We're going to start going through draft 9.1 of S226.
which you have.
Which you have in front of you. I'm going to try and breeze through a lot of this because we've really, I think, overextended our welcome on permitting stuff. We've talked about it so many times. But the first section is findings. Well, actually, it might be better, Alan, with that approach going really fast and saying, rating the questions that they ask, if you can just do real quick summaries of each section, because I'll mess it up a little mess.
Sure. Good morning. Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. So I'm going to be addressing the land use sections. So starting on page 1 with section 2 through 2E. These are sections that you have heard before. They came out of H511. The first section, section 2, on page 1 is a findings section related to the housing elements of the land use elements of H511. Next, on page 2 is section 2A, the statute on neighborhood development areas. So this has a few different elements updating the neighborhood development area statute. It allows towns to file joint applications. It allows them to include flood hazard areas in the neighborhood development area. If infill development is acceptable under the A&R rules, and it requires that if they're going to do that, they have to have adopted the model bylaws consistent with A&R's model bylaws. It strikes the requirement that an NDA have either a municipal sewer infrastructure or an approved community or alternative wastewater system. And then it updates the language around density required in an NDA so that it's for residential units of any kind within the zoning districts and not less than in any other part of town.
Could you just explain what that does? I know it's sort of technical and more flexible. It used to say you have to allow for 4 single-family residents. Now you could have 4 units in a quadplex. That'd be the only thing on that acre.
Right. So this language is on page 5, and it does relate to how density is calculated when the department is looking at the zoning requirements in the neighborhood development area. So yes, it strikes the requirement that the density be related to single-family dwelling units and changes the language to all identified residential dwelling units. So yes, it can include areas that are zoned for multifamily dwellings, duplexes, fourplexes, and that goes into the calculation for reaching the density of 4 units per acre.
How does that help produce more dense housing? Doesn't. It's a different choice.
Can I phone a friend on that one?
Absolutely. Is he to your right?
Yes. I think the members of the department might be able to speak to that.
Jacob, I'm going to pass on to you.
The mayor, this is the first time we get to hear from the mayor.
I'm not speaking as the mayor right now. Jake
Great.
Kimmer with the Department of Housing and Community Development. I don't think it necessarily helps or hurts. It's really a neutral provision that's about treating all housing types equally and all density equally. And so what this does is it just clarifies that we're not just looking for single family detached dwelling units in the zoning district, but any residential use that's allowed in that zoning district, we're checking to make sure that it's achieving at least 4 dwelling units per acre, an efficient economy of scale, and a permissive, being permissive to housing.
And I just,
I might be asked that question on the floor, so I just want to be ready. Okay.
Keisha has a question.
Sorry, Keisha.
I mean, I'm trying to keep up with real-time changes around the country as well, where a lot of municipalities and states like California are, in my understanding, trying to streamline the ability to cut single-family dwellings into duplexes and fourplexes without significant permitting burdens. So just sort of giving single-family homes that right to cut up their properties as well. I don't know if others in the room are trying to follow this as well, but this California law is going into effect. And I believe there are other municipalities that are simply trying to look at, there should never be a reason that you tell a single family homeowner who has the proper sewer and wastewater hookups that they can't create more housing in the same footprint.
Let's go on to section 2B, I guess.
Yes, so 2B on page 6 has nearly identical language to the language we were just discussing, but this is updating the statute on Newtown centers. So it's requiring that the Newtown center have densities of not less than 4 dwelling units per acre, including all identified residential types, and densities not less than areas outside the designated area. So it can't be, other parts of the town cannot be more dense than the Newtown center.
Just remind me how many Newtown centers we have.
2, 1, I think Berlin is or Newtown Center designation.
And it differs from a downtown, again, we gotta do these designation updates. And it differs from a downtown because it's not in a downtown.
It's a community that doesn't have a traditional center.
Right, it's like South Burlington.
South Burlington and Colchester are current
Right.
Newtown centers. Berlin is looking at the area on the hospital,
Right,
how to redevelop that shopping plaza
right.
to create a town center.
That's just a good reminder.
Okay, section 2C is on page 7. This this states that no municipal land use permit, specifically site plan permits or conditional use permits, shall expire in less than 2 years. And there's currently no provision in law stating an expiration date, so this is a new addition. So not less than 2 years on those permits. Section 2D starts with some Act 250 amendments. So first, on page 8, so this is related to the concept of priority housing projects. Under Act 250, priority housing projects are exempt. However, there is a cap on the number of units that are exempt in the smaller towns. Currently, towns with less than 3,000 people have a cap of 25 units. This is removing that cap and saying towns with less than 6,000 people have a cap of 50 units. So it's removing the smallest of the caps.
Replacing it with a bigger, with 6,050.
So that,
Because it
it's
still
tiered,
says 3,000.
so it's a tiered system. So currently towns with 0 to 3,000 people have a cap of 25 units. Then towns 3,000 to 6,000 have a cap of 50 units. But under this bill, you're removing the smallest cap. So any town with a population less than 6,000
Can do 50.
can do 50.
This is Putney example.
Right.
The next is all technical, right? This is VHFA, should try to true up. the
Yes.
qualifying statute.
On page 9, that's the update for the definition of mixed income housing to match VHFA's current calculation that they do.
I would think that's 101, not our version, right?
Yes. Next is another change to the definition of priority housing project. So currently, priority housing projects, to be exempt under Act 250, you have to meet a number of different elements. So currently, in neighborhood development areas to be a priority housing project, the project has to be exclusively consisting of housing. However, in downtowns, Newtown centers, and growth centers, a priority housing project can be mixed use, so including commercial and affordable housing. This is extending that mixed use allowance to neighborhood development areas as well. So now, if the project is going to be in the downtowns, Newtown centers, growth centers, or an NDA, it can be made of mixed use projects with commercial and affordable housing.
So it extends mixed use housing to NDAs.
Yes. Next to section 2E, still on this topic of priority housing projects. So currently, priority housing projects are exempt from Act 250. However, if they're going to be constructed on a site with an existing Act 250 permit, they would need to get a permit amendment. However, there's a special process in here for how that would happen. And so this is actually striking that language and just saying no permit or permit is recommended for construction for priority housing projects.
So this is for projects that had an Act 250 permit and a priority housing project wants to add onto that area, and they would have to get an Act 250 amendment.
Yes. Okay, so that concludes section 2 and the H511 language.
Right.
My next section is section 6, starts on page 17.
So Dave, okay.
Do you,
These are all David.
yeah, do you want to,
Now let's continue with your sections.
Okay.
And I'll move back to it.
So now we go to you to section 6.
yes. And this is the section on municipal bylaw grant modernization,
Right.
bylaw modernization grants. So first, 4306 is amended to add the reference to these new types of grants. And on page 18, it also allows the department to use up to 10% of the funds for reasonable and necessary costs of administering the program.
So, may I ask a question? So our partner with this is, who are you partnering with on the bylaw modernization? The RPCs or the RPC?
It could be a combination of Chris Cochran for the department. It could be a combination of the RPCs or the municipalities directly coming to us for an application.
So this, does the 10% to administer this also go to the RPCs?
No, it would go to the department for its costs.
Okay, so is there any help for the RPCs here?
The RPCs get an annual allocation from the department, around $3 million to support these kinds of activities. And they're also getting the grants themselves, which they're allowed to, covers their costs. We're the only ones who run the program without the administrative overhead.
I've asked this question before. Do we really need this section 4?
Yes, if you would like the department to be able to use some of these funds. This is a special fund.
Okay.
So the language that's above, that's actually, most of it's cut out of here under the ellipses, but because it's a special fund, the uses of it are specifically listed.
Got
it. Is that a norm, 10%? That sounds kind of high to me for administrative costs.
I'm not sure if it's.
Was that in 101, the 10% before?
No.
So it was an oversight. We should have had something for administrative costs. The way we had passed 101, if that had gone to the Senate version, had gone to the government, then they wouldn't have been able to use any of this money for administration.
Correct.
So that $500,000 last year, how much did you give out?
You know, all $500,000.
So you didn't take any further, say,
No, yeah, I mean, it's the reality that, there's payout funds that we get. Our costs are increasing more than we actually get in payout. So we're just in a tight spot of how we support our existing staff to run these.
So we're giving out now actually 650,000 if that goes through. $65,000 could be used for processing the applications and reviewing things. That's like a half-time person. Seems high to me.
Where did that number come from?
It was a number I talked to with Commissioner Hanford, and it was an up to number. Our intent is not to, we just want to be able to cover our costs. So if you want to lower that to a number that you feel comfortable, that's fine.
Well, it does say for the reasonable necessary costs of administering the fund. I doubt anybody's gonna have to audit it, but to the extent that seems reasonable, then you put a cap on. I don't know if anybody care about this.
Got an idea of what we're spending, administrative costs, because those are the things that are in everything.
No, I understand. So the 10% seems high to me.
Yeah, so
For a grant.
the notion is what's the right amount, and it seems that that would be something you guys would be thinking about, to come back with us with a number rather than an arbitrary percentage.
But maybe it is generally when this is done for special funds, maybe that is
Maybe
the
that is,
arbitrary
yeah.
percentage.
Maybe it is, I guess that's really the question, where's
Well-
the number come from?
Well,
Is it reasonable?
I guess I would ask to get back to us on the commission. We can always just change the percentage. It should be governed theoretically by reasonable and necessary, but there's a cap. So we want to say that 5%. We may say that, see if you can live with less. Okay?
Perfect. I'm on it.
Okay, so section 6A on page 18 then does have the text describing the bylaw modernization grant program. So there are some small changes in here based on the last draft. This is largely the language that your committee passed, but there have been changes from the last draft and from the version you passed. So the first change that's on page 18 was one of the issues that you discussed in your last committee hearing. This bill, or this program used the phrase smart growth areas. That was an undefined term. Those are the areas that the municipalities are directed to be looking at for this grant program and where the changes in the bylaw should be impacting. So Senator Clarkson and I and the NRC, we looked at what are some of the options for this area description. Yeah.
So this is where we would want, because remember we talked about, Randy, I think you raised it, that we would want to define smart growth areas, so we did that.
Well, what we didn't define it because one of the things it's
We let it be flexible
right.
for town.
So the phrase that I inserted here, right, is areas planned for smart growth. And there's an additional phrase as the bill goes on, consistent with the smart growth areas, but unless you're prescribing specifically where the town needs to do this, I think the committee's intent is to have the town identify areas where they want smart growth.
Right. And it refers at one point to a section that actually has a full definition of it, correct?
Right, so in 2791 in Title 24, there are the principles of smart growth, and so that is referenced further on in the bill.
Right. So we did a further honing of this, Randy.
Right, so just by way of example, this sentence now reads, bylaws updated under this section shall increase housing choice, affordability, and opportunity in areas planned for smart growth.
Right. Where's the reference for those smart growth guidelines again, Ellen?
It's in 24 VSA 2791.
And we refer to it on the next page, Randy. On
791.
page 19. It has it further here.
I did also want to add, in that sentence I just mentioned, you did add the word affordability based on the recommendations from VHCB.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah, so affordability has been added throughout this section as well. And so the next change on this topic is on page 19. So subsection E. A municipality grantee shall use the funds to prepare amendments to the bylaws to increase housing choice, affordability, and opportunity, and that support a neighborhood development pattern that is pedestrian oriented in areas planned for smart growth, consistent with the smart growth principles established in 2791 of this title, and that prioritize projects in designated areas in accordance with chapter 76A of this title. So that's sort of one of the overall statements about this program.
Okay.
And then the other, so there are some changes again on page 20 to reflect this additional language about areas planned for smart growth. So on the top of page 20, one of the things the municipality shall include are parking waiver provisions in areas planned for smart growth, consistent with the smart growth principles defined in 2791, and appropriate situations.
Okay.
And then the rest of the language, we did talk about briefly in the last meeting. It did, because it is slight, subsections 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are similar to the underlying or the prior draft in S101, but not the same. They were based on the language provided by the department.
Right, we've looked at this language
Right.
several times.
Right. And I did want to point out that again, it's not highlighted, but because it wasn't the last draft, but VHCB's recommended language was added on page 21 in subsection 9 about the housing element. So that was another one of their requests, making sure that the bylaws support.
I think that was in the House version of 101.
Right, a close piece of language, but this was again just to reflect that.
Affordability.
Yeah.
So it's 650 now for bylaw, to continue the bylaw work.
Yes, so that's the next section on page 21. Section 6B is the appropriation, $650,000 to the planning fund to be used for the bylaw modernization grants.
And that's the first. No, it's not.
And the administration supports that appropriation, right?
The administration recommended a $600,000 increase to the municipal planning grants, which is a broader fund. They didn't specifically call out this inclusion of the earmarking of additional funds for bylaw modernization grants. So the simple answer is no.
Did we get an answer with Josh's other answers?
So the question is this additional or is this in lieu of that 600,000 he will give the planners?
My read is it's additional.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's what this committee have been talking about, is to continue this program for another year, because you have people on the waiting list that we thought it was useful and you're excited about what we did last year. So,
And towns are excited about it. Having now been to many meetings.
so we'll have to deal with that with these appropriations. I'm sure we'll ask that question when the bill next down there. Okay, so let's continue.
All right, so section 7 starts the sections on the downtown and village center tax credit program and its expansion.
Right.
So the last time we spoke, I did mention that in the prior drafts of this bill, there were 2 competing provisions. I know that your committee is interested in expanding this program to neighborhood development areas. So,
But without harming or the downtown fund.
right, so what I did to address that is at the top of page 22. So what I did here was, this is the section that has the cap. So this bill does raise the cap on the tax credit program to $5 million. And I added the language that's highlighted to say with up to $1 million awarded to qualified projects in neighborhood development areas. Right.
So that leaves an increase of $1 million for downtowns to 4.
Yes.
Well, it's up to, so if there's not enough applications, presumably you could allocate
Right.
it to the downtowns.
Well, unless we get more neighborhood development areas, then
Which, yes.
have a catch-22 here. On the other hand, that sweetens the pot.
It's all good.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe our objective is to have more more NDAs with what we are doing in this bill. And so this is the reward for becoming one.
Precisely.
I'm anxious to get through this.
Right. So, again, yeah, so the next section 7A adds neighborhood development area to this program. It also adds the qualified flood mitigation projects as a new type of tax credit that's available under this program.
Still subject to the $5 million cap.
Yes, yes. And I did want to add, so the other new change in this section is on page 25, section 7B. You requested a 5-year limit on this. So I made it a sunset. I added a sunset provision. So no new tax credit may be allocated for projects in neighborhood development areas after July 1, 2027. I don't know if that's the exact date, but 5 years out is what I was going with.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. So then 7C is a technical correction. 7D adds reference to the tax credit as an incentive for NDAs. 7E is a technical correction related to this.
Sorry.
Yep.
Can I just ask this before we cruise by 7B? Are we setting goals that we're wanting to see them accomplish for us to either decide, are we setting aside criteria for review for a sunset?
There isn't any report on this.
So how are people going to decide whether to sunset it or not? I mean, do you know what I mean? Should we, maybe the House can do this, but it strikes me that you'd want to have some set of criteria by which to make a decision about whether to sunset it or not, or keep it going.
We would report on the outcomes of the program, whether a report was required or not. But if you would like to add that, that's fine.
Right, there is an annual report.
Right. So, okay.
And they're gonna have, someone's gonna have to come in and say, we want to
Make your
continue this
case.
program.
Yeah, okay, sorry, I just was realizing we don't have anything that says anything about that. Okay.
Is the report that's done quantitative or qualitative?
Some of both.
Well, in other words, I'm trying to follow it. Did it do what it was intended to do successfully?
Right, that's what I'm.
We do an annual report on the tax credits. Where the
I mean, the
money
report
runs.
would say how much credits and where the dollar amounts and how many people got them and so on. And that's, it's like, measuring the quality of the house based on the number of nails you put in it. You want to know, is it livable? Is it?
Look, all projects have to meet, life safety codes. They have to be approved to meet certain standards. So I think, and we have the images of the buildings before and after. So there's, so I think it is both. But we would, in this instance, we would be very interested in reporting the number of units that were created, the cost of the units that were created, evidence of that sort of.
Okay. We can send this all. I remember the report being very colorful, so. A lot of good pictures. But I know that, it's been a very popular and oversubscribed program, and cats meow, etc. But let's move on. If people want to look at the report and add language, do that before we go on.
Sure. So page 28 is the last section on this tax credit program, 7F. This has the cap. So For flood mitigation tax credits, this new project, or this new tax credit for these projects, it's the maximum tax credit is $75,000.
Chris, do you have any idea how many applications you might get for this in a year?
It is hard to guess, because really, we don't know what the universe of applicants are gonna be in any given year. But this was a recommendation in the Vermont Climate Action Plan.
Okay.
Right.
I know our communities are at risk. We need to start taking steps like our coastal communities are right now to protect against future floods, and this is like, it seems like a smart investment to me.
So this comes out of our pot of 4 million for the downtown tax credit?
There's a new category of eligibility. Right now, you pay for in general code, wiring, elevator, those kind of things. This is a special category for flood mitigation activities to elevate the building, to flood-proof the building, flood protect the building.
Right.
This is, and they're not mandated. It's only if the private property owner wants to make the changes and the building is in a higher risk area that it's eligible. To answer your question, I have no idea what the uptake is, but I know all of our downtown villages are located near
Almost
water.
every one of them is by a river.
And we need to do something to encourage them to remain on the landscape.
Okay. Section 8.
Yes, section 8 and section 8A are the sections related to wastewater connection permits. This was in S101, it hasn't changed. This is setting requirements that if a municipality meets these requirements, then projects in that town are exempt from getting the A&R wastewater permit in addition to the municipal wastewater permit. And then finally, section 20 is the ADU provision, or I think it's section 20. Towards the end, actually, I don't know.
I don't have it here in the summary. How can it not be in our summary?
It's section 9, I
Oh, it's
apologize, not 20.
Section,
Yes.
right.
At the bottom of page 30, I'm sorry, this is a new draft. So at the bottom of page 30 onto page 31, we did discuss this last time. This is amending the parking language in Title 24. So it just adds a provision that says a municipality shall not require an accessory dwelling unit to have more than one parking space per bedroom. And I know your committee did discuss other options the last time, but I don't think you decided on anything. But this is the language that we discussed
Right.
the last time we were here.
And I asked if you could think of any way to get at Senator Rock's concern.
I don't have any. I guess I would need a little more information, maybe for my.
Well, he's just looking
specific
for
reasons.
an off-ramp in unusual circumstances to, I think, to what, to one size fits all.
I was trying to avoid the notion that we are the zoning board of the state, able to make wise decisions about each and every situation in each and every municipality. To have at least some ability to have exceptions for COVID reasons, for example.
Yeah, I was thinking that the lawyer was, allowing for variances for clear, compelling evidence or something like that. But somebody mentioned something at the end of the last hearing, I thought, that said that a lot of towns don't necessarily use bedroom sizes as connected to parking. And so this will be necessary to make sure that they don't inadvertently discourage ADUs by putting the requirement that people would be able to develop. I think the whole purpose of the bill is to develop more, housing, denser housing, and ADUs is a good thing, and just don't want people to circumvent it by a parking restriction in their regulations.
Where's all the rest of our ADU language?
It's in here.
I can't.
Let's just deal with this for now.
So this is the statute that allows municipalities to set parking minimums, and so that is why I added this language here. If you're interested in doing something else, towns are already allowed to be less restrictive than the statute, but I guess off the top of my head, I don't have unless I guess I would need more information about what kinds of situations you would want to allow the town to not comply with this. But yeah, I don't have a suggestion.
You want to think about it overnight, Senator Rock, see if you can think of, talk to your town administrator or something. Like, just keep in mind that we're trying to, and this is not I understand that could always be unusual circumstances, but this is not an overly burden to say, it's big for a bedroom. So.
This seems like a degree of minutia.
Yeah.
That the state shouldn't be involved.
I know. Yep, thank you.
But it's a big issue. I mean, the parking is a big issue.
And I mean, this is circumstantial, but you know, this language has been out for a couple of weeks. And nobody's complained to me about it. So that's that helps.
Well, I mean, that's the other issue, is solving a problem that doesn't exist.
Well, we know parking is a cost.
It's just a problem. In other words, we've seen some documented examples that have been adverse to what it is.
Yeah. Burlington is an example that comes to mind. They got rid of their parking requirements for use. They recognized it was an expense that was not necessary, that was a barrier to production.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't want there to be a situation where the town can easily prohibit ADUs by saying, I want 3 parking spots for every bedroom in an ADU. Okay, anything?
That is the end of my section.
Okay, David. Can you come in and fill in the sections? And can we go over 10 minutes?
Yeah, we have our, I just have to clue into our caucus at 12:15.
Okay. See if we can go through this.
Is this the most current summary, Sybil?
Yeah.
Great. Well, I still have section 1. David Aller said council.
Strike section 1. We're not study on that.
2, 3, the change here is rather than, originating a new $5 million program for first generation home buyers, it amends 32 VSA 5932, which governs the down payment assistance program. This is on page 12. And adds a new subdivision D that says that the agency may give priority to or reserve a certain amount of funding for first-time home buyers who are also first-generation home buyers. So it embeds the concept in the down payment assistance program without creating a new program.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I understand if there's newfound flexibility in the upper limit of dollars that they can provide under this program, or what is the upper limit now?
No, in all the $5 million add-ons, what has been done is not to add money to the bottom line of housing, but to give discretion within the agencies who will run similar programs, in this case to give priority if they want to, and I think there's going to be some overlap, first generation and first time home buyers, and if they want to give priority to the down payment assistance program to the first generation people, they can clearly do it by this language.
I guess I'm just, so, BHFA pointed out that the amount that we had generally been giving out for first time home buyers might not be sufficient compared to first generation folks, because, and I think it's not a tax credit, it's now a grant.
It's a grant.
Okay, so that certainly
We have,
helps.
we have a program to help people buy, first-time home buyers.
Right.
It's not targeted specifically to first-generation home buyers. So we're now just saying that within the first-time home buyer, you can give priority to first generation. We could change this if you want to tell to say that they shall give priority, but we probably want to take some more testimony on that. I think our message is clear, you know, go out, talk to these people, and if you have comparable applications, give priority to someone who is a first-time home buyer and a first-generation home buyer.
Right, and I think, may I just tag on that I think our hope had been to raise, so the amount at the moment is $7,500, I believe that's the cap, and that we would take this for first-time home buyers, for first-generation home buyers, that the cap would go up to 10, is I think what we had originally hoped for.
Yeah, I mean, I VHFA said more than 10 even would be helpful. You know, it's just so different if you don't have generational wealth to rely on for the costs of closing on a home. So they could probably make do with 10, but it might not ultimately serve the same people they had in mind.
We really haven't taken any testimony on changing the first-time home buyer parameters. I'm not necessarily with some value to giving more money to prioritizing first-generation home buyers, but I'm not sure we can say with any degree of certainty that they're any more needy than a first-time home buyer. They may have the same need. So we're giving some. Look, it could be dealt with in the house. We're not changing this at this point. I mean, we can't like start coming up with numbers without hearing from more.
And we still, yeah, we need a money truck, which would be great to have on this baby, because I think that's a.
Well, I think at the present time, we're trying to, without getting any specific directions from the Appropriations Committee, we're trying to stay within the administration's overall numbers. So that's probably wise, I mean, with the exception of the 650,000, which we put into modernization.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can email Maura and get her to weigh in. I just think there's not just a difference between first-time homebuyers and first-generation homebuyers in terms of being in line, but the necessary support to help harder to house first-time homebuyers who also are first generation. It's a different category of need, was what we were hearing as to why to not just put them first in line, but to provide additional support because they don't have additional people in their lives who have the wealth of home ownership.
So we could give the agency flexibility to increase the size if we want.
We could. Look at
That would be.
I think that might be, until the House does further work, I think what would be a good compromise would be to give the agency flexibility to take the grant size up to whatever for first generation purchasing.
Yeah, my recollection of the program is you become eligible based upon income and then you qualify for whatever the closing costs are. That's the variable in the amount, not, you don't get a different amount of money based upon how poor or.
Right, but
Is that correct?
it is
David,
a grant
you
up
know
to.
you remember anything about that? First assistance. Jen.
Jen has it.
Jen Holder, Vermont Housing Conservation Board, and of course I can't speak for VHFA, but I will just note for the committee that this language does not it doesn't limit VHFA to any certain amount of assistance per household. They will have the flexibility within this language and statute to make the adjustment that Senator Rom Hinsdale is talking about if they want to. If you direct them to prioritize it, that could be something they choose to do. They have that flexibility now, which isn't
Okay, I was just trying to make sure.
Maura, but it's not set. That amount is not set in statute.
Okay.
That's fine, I have the flexibility. I thought the program was more, the amount of the grant was more premised on your closing costs as opposed to your income. Qualified for the program based on your income, but then what you got was to cover a certain amount of closing costs. And some closing costs are more than others, you know, origination fees, depending on mortgage terms and stuff like that. So, all right, we could find out for more, and we can also add, in addition, in the enabling, that make it priority or reserve a certain amount, you know, give them the authority to give, you know, essentially an enhanced benefit if they want to people. It's a different calculation, but see what you can find out, Keisha, okay?
You're right, Mr. Chair, as and that you'll see it there on line 5 and 6. The limit on the money is the amount of the down payment or closing costs or both. So it's once you're in the program, it's not, again, like you said, it's not tied to your income. It's on the cost of the acquisition, which could vary substantially from house to house, right?
All right, let's see if we can plow through here.
I think it's VHFA itself that is set the 7,500.
Yeah, I believe VHFA has set, there is 7,500 sticks in my mind. Anyway, let's find out for more. Thank you, Keisha.
The sections 4 and 4A relating to manufactured homes, you'll recall that 4 started its life in the Senate bill, a wide variety of expenditures that could be made for mobile home parks and owners. And subsequently, this language was substituted for that. This is from the administration, section 4.
Right, well, it's from the administration of PHCB too.
Right.
Everybody agreed on how to spend, to divide up this money for manufactured home, in addition to the tax credit. So that takes us through.
So this is 5 million altogether, right?
Yes. So then section 4A increases the amount of the affordable housing tax credit. You can see on page 14, the annual credit allocation amount is increased by $250,000, and it specifies that of those, basically that increase should be used for manufactured home purchase and replacement.
So that credit is, even though it's called the affordable housing tax credit, it's used for more than just mobile homes presently?
Yes, it is. This is the scheme by which, you know, as the authorizing agency, you've given VHFA the ability to raise a certain pot of money every year by basically selling tax credits, usually to financial institutions, insurance companies, and then they use that money to make investments in all kinds of affordable housing projects.
On that. Okay, we're not going to be able to finish this, so let's just, if we can talk about the ADU sections, changes that were suggested.
Yeah, where are they? I can't find them because we had a whole, originally we had like 5 or 6, 7 sections of ADU stuff.
So page 30 and 31 are is where it starts, right?
But is that where we talk about long-term rentals and navigators? Where's all that?
So
I'm missing.
the prior draft did have additional language, but that was requested to be taken out. So there were other pieces. There was the navigation center, but the chair requested that was taken out. That's not in there. I don't know what you mean by long term.
But any money that's spent creating ADUs.
Is your section?
Well, we were splitting it because there's the statutory language on zoning for ADUs, but then also you did have something related to VHIP.
Right, but this is independent of that.
Okay, so I don't know what that.
Sorry, in our previous summary, we had a section 20 we had a whole section about the navigators and enabling navigators to help all these private citizens that we would embed it at DHCD, I think. And that we would,
So initially.
create this ADU.
Let me see, unless David, you want to try to clarify what's going on, I can, I think. So in the version you got last night, there was a whole section of ADU, and the ADU section is embedded in the rental housing and safety bill. And we had to change the rental housing and safety bill, which is an S210, which hasn't passed yet. So I had originally told David, put the whole thing in and make the changes on the ADUs we requested,
Okay.
which I think are fourfold. It's 25% of all the go to ADUs, of which 80% basically has to go for grants for ADUs, and the rest could go for navigators and administrative stuff. It said that the ADUs had to be long-term rentals.
Yeah.
And it also said a couple other things. The cap on the ADUs, we agreed with 50,000 of administration. So we basically,
And
we're amending S210 to add these new ADU elements, and I have the whole thing put in here. I said, we don't need all of 210 in here again, we voted on that. So let's just put the pieces that are changing. ADUs are part of the VHIP program, so we have to make specific reference that we want to encourage ADUs in the VHIP program. I hadn't realized they had taken it out
Yeah.
already, because I had asked them to do that as a thought
but I
this
want,
morning. I guess
Okay.
it's not in this draft.
so
If you look on page 70 and 71, you'll see it's actually in the appropriation section that funds Vermont Rental Housing Investment Program. And that's where the breakout occurs that says 25% of all the money goes to ADUs provided.
sorry, where,
So bottom
Page
page
70.
70.
Yellow.
I see 20%, sorry, I'm not seeing 20. Oh, yes, got it, okay.
You know, somewhere else there should be the fact that it has to be for long term. It can't be for short term rental. I know,
So we don't
I
use
know,
the-
I know I read that somewhere in here.
That's back in the program itself.
Where is that? 'Cause I couldn't find that.
Top of Page 61.
There you go.
Bottom of page 61.
Ah, okay. Is it worth framing that in a more positive way? Instead of not be used, it has to be used for a long-term, a long-term rental, I guess. Is it easier to do it this way, David?
I don't know whether it matters, but short-term rental is
Is
statutory.
defined, right? Okay. Oh, it isn't long-term, is it?
We don't really have a definition anywhere in law of long-term rental.
Oh.
I don't have a cross-reference to 18.
Can you add to that, David, just the cross-reference in the statute?
Does this mean that it is never able to be used as a short-term dwelling, even 5 years after whatever is done is done?
Well, that's a good question. So do the ADUs have to comply with the same things we're requiring of VHIP, that they have to have homelet? I'm a little puzzled by that now that it's because originally with our bill, in the housing bill, we had the ADU stuff sort of as its own program.
This is a tricky area.
Yeah.
It's a tricky area of enforcement that exists with ADUs all over the state in terms of how you know, whether you convert it and then changes use and stuff
Essentially,
like
are
that.
we creating a perpetual covenant?
We're saying that this extra unit that we've developed in housing shall perpetually be an extra unit. What we're not doing, I don't think, is doing the same thing we're asking of landlords and homeowners to rent to low-income people for 10 years. We're saying you can rent to whoever you want, but we want you not to turn it into a tourist unit. And yes, I mean, Jacob is probably the most knowledgeable here on this stuff, you know. It's not gonna be iron tight, you know, 20 years from now, if somebody wants to start renting it out. I've been on the development review board, zoning board, you may have been also, you know. In South Burlington, the answer I got, there is no enforcement, you know, with all these restrictions we're putting on, you know. But I guess they could be told that they have to shut them down. Yeah, you can't start turning it into a weekend rental if we're trying to, that's the long-term commitment that you argued for, I agree with, and that's the trade-off.
I don't think we can be using public money to let people do short-term rentals.
We could rent for people short term.
Well, that's what we're doing with the Vita program. Would you rather have that? I mean, there's a trade-off. Yeah. But we want something back. So, all right, so you gotta go.
I don't know where.
Please read through the new chart and the bill, and so we'll take this up first thing tomorrow morning. And Keisha, look into the thing you want to look into and Senator Block, if you can come up with some magic words on parking, I'm open to it.